Yeah, actually, I'm gonna make this a video instead. So I'm here and I'm talking about why this building, it's not a home for sure, because home requires emotion and love, right? Not control. So it's definitely not a home. And I'm saying it's not even a business, because in the business, you're saying, and you're coming in, it doesn't even matter what kind of you do. It could be gig work or Amazon. It could be something more formal, right? Like an office building or, public, right? Governmental type work. But generally, there is something like this, right? You know what you're gonna give them for the most part. There's a list that says roles and expectations, right? And we're talking about on paper, right? The ideal business, a fair business, how it actually is supposed to work. Now, we're not talking about how it actually plays out, because we all know how businesses nowadays tend to play out for the most part. But the idea is the concept, right? The core concept is that you come in, they're looking for a service. They need help. They need something from someone, right? So you're given, here's what you're gonna do. And then they say, here's what we're going to give you back. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's saying, we're going to pay you over time. Sometimes it's saying, we're going to give you shares of the company. But the point is that there's some kind of pre-agreement and expectation that we both know what we're both getting into. And, we kind of have an expectation of how it's going to turn out, And, we both kind of come in voluntarily, right? Knowing that we've agreed to your terms, and for whatever reason, we accept them as fair, or we accept them as fair, exactly. But it's voluntarily, for the most part. We're not even, I'm excluding the fact that the whole U.S. system is literally a prison system, but that's a little more meta. So anyways, that's a business, the idea of a business. Now, this building is not a business either. What it is, actually, it's a plantation, a slavery plantation, right? The slave gets born at the plantation, right? They grow up, they're little babies and kids, so they're not hauling cotton yet or anything. They might be playing with the master's children or whatever. But over time, they get more and more roles. And the thing is that they don't get paid. They do get paid in a sense, but it's not that the slave is choosing how to get paid. It's more like, I grew up here, this is the expectation, this is just how it is, right? That's what they're more into. Like the slave says, I want more, or I want something else, then, what happens? Boom, right? Something physical, verbal, whatever. Something goes down, and usually, for the most part, because the slave's kind of like, well, this is how it's always been, that's just how it is, they go with that too. Sometimes they do get paid, and we're not saying that they're getting paid a fair amount. We're saying they get paid enough to be like, hey, look, I made $5 all week. Whoa, I'm gonna go spend it on something. You know what I mean? They get enough to not complain. That's what the slave master does. They pay only enough cash, and usually they don't want to give cash. Usually they're like, they give a non-cash option, because it's the same thing. So that's what happens, that a slave doesn't get paid. They get paid only barely enough to not complain, only enough to be like, if I complain, I will feel bad because the master is giving me cash, and it's my fault for not spending it correctly. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's how the U.S. government runs, essentially. And not just the U.S. government, this building specifically, that's how it runs too, for the most part. So that is why this building is not a home, it's not even a business. It's a slavery operation. That's what it is. It's a slavery operation, and it's disguised as a home. Enmeshed And that is literally what happens with religion. And like I said, any textbook, think about this. What does a computer do? You program it. Literally zeros and ones. You program the computer a certain way. You go to the Apple Store. You turn on every computer. They are all literally following the exact same program, for the most part. Given that they're like the same model essentially. And, they might have a few different specs. They might have a different serial number, but for the most part, it's the same operating system, right? Same thing with Windows. So that's what a religious textbook is. It's a programming piece of paper, essentially, a programming list. It doesn't matter, right? We get a new operating version of your iPhone or your Mac, like pretty much every year, right? A textbook isn't going to get that exact same update. They might update it in the King James version, whatever version, you know what I mean? So they update it every few centuries, but it's still the same idea. It's still a coding, programming thing. Here's a code, and then you follow it. But for the most part, the coding is the exact same thing. So, yeah. And the slave masters are following this code. And then they're giving this code down, and they're passing the code down. The code might be reinterpreted, right? We all start up with the same iPhone or Mac OS version, but we all kind of customize it to our own thing, because we have the capability to. But the thing is that you don't do the same thing with a religious book. You might reinterpret it, but for the most part, the programming stays the same. Oh, and that's why operating systems get updated, right? Think about this. You come out with a version, right? Virus shows up, or like, hey, there's a glitch in the system. You get a software update, a version update, right? That doesn't happen with a religious textbook. And we're not even talking about Mac OS 10.1, 0.2, 0.3, whatever. We're literally talking about like Mac OS. I honestly, they're so old I wouldn't even remember, and you guys probably won't get the reference anyways. Trying to think. Windows, DOS, Windows 98, Windows XP, Windows Vista, and I forget the rest. But you guys kind of get the analogy. We're not talking about like, oh, I just updated it from last year. No, we're talking about major revisions. Yeah. So this household is not a home. It's a slavery prison system. Yeah, I'm not going to look it up, but I'm pretty sure that there are situations where slaves were actually paid, cash, right? That wouldn't surprise me. But more than anything, I think for the most part, they weren't getting paid to become free. They were getting paid to stay quiet, to stop complaining. Which is good. Give them an inch to get more inches. That's good. That happened. So I'm going to continue making my eggs.